Harry Potter and Ginny Weasley's marriage produced 3 children. Unlike their parents, most of the Potter children lived a peaceful, quiet life. But surprisingly, one of them, an ugly duckling sorted into Slytherin, nearly resurrected Lord Voldemort and destroyed the wizarding world as we know it. So, who exactly were Harry's children, and what legacy did they leave behind? Join us as we answer these questions and more in today's video. James Sirius Potter. James Sirius Potter was Harry and Ginny's firstborn child. Although we're not quite sure about when he was born, all records indicate that his birth date falls between the summer of 2003 and the fall of the following year. As you can probably tell from his name, James Sirius Potter was born with quite a powerful name. His first name is taken from his paternal grandfather, James Potter, who was murdered by Lord Voldemort on Halloween in 1981, and his middle name, Sirius, was taken from Harry's godfather, Sirius Black III. Unlike Harry's other son, Albus, James Sirius Potter never seemed to mind the burden of his names. When Harry named his children, he decided to honor the most important people in his life. Mainly, that meant the many people who sacrificed themselves in order to protect him during Voldemort's dark reign. While Harry's intentions might have been honorable, the burden of bearing those names was often more than his children could handle. But, as we've mentioned, James didn't really seem to mind it all that much. Little has been written about James's childhood, but we can guess a few things. Since both of his parents were powerful magic users, James benefited by growing up in a household rich with culture. Unlike Harry, who was neglected by the Dursleys and kept ignorant of the wizarding world, James was immersed in it. It's easy to imagine Harry, Ginny, and James taking regular trips into the countryside to visit their many friends and former classmates who studied magizoology in the wilderness. Or, when they didn't feel like trekking into the wild, perhaps the Potters went to Diagon Alley to do some much-needed shopping. Ginny probably handed James a few coins to buy a handful of cauldron cakes and pumpkin pasties from Sugar Plum's sweet shop. James's name first appears in written records when he was 11 years old. Along with the rest of his family, he took a once-in-a-lifetime trip to the Quidditch World Cup. There, Harry once again used his old connections to meet one of the most famous Quidditch athletes in the world, Viktor Krum. He introduced Krum to his boys, and together they wore Bulgarian jerseys to show their support. In 2015, James received his letter of admissions from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. By that fall, he took his first trip aboard the Hogwarts Express, was sorted as a Gryffindor, and began his studies as a wizard. During his time at Hogwarts, James got his hands on both the Marauders map and the invisibility cloak. Unlike his father, Harry, James was never dragged into any memorable adventures. And unlike his own grandfather, James Potter I, the younger James was never much of a bully, and actually seemed to be rather well liked. Albus Severus Potter. Albus Severus Potter was the second child from Harry and Ginny's relationship. Albus was born only 2 years after his older brother, James. Before Albus enrolled in Hogwarts, the two boys shared a typical brotherly relationship. At times, they were best friends, and at others, they were bitter rivals. Through it all, they lived a quiet, peaceful childhood, with splashes of excitement, like the time Albus went with his family to the Quidditch World Cup in 2014. Although, unlike James Potter II, Albus was worried. He couldn't help but notice all the stares he received from strangers when they first heard his name. He was named after one of the most powerful wizards in the world, Albus Dumbledore, and one of the most important spies of the Second Wizarding War, Severus Snape. But Albus Severus Potter felt as though he couldn't measure up to either legacy, and after failing to successfully fulfill simple magical tasks, that doubt seemed to be proven true. In the fall of 2017, Albus Severus joined his brother, James, on his journey to Hogwarts. This was Albus's first year at school, and he was worried that his magical inadequacies, along with the heavy scrutiny that a Potter regularly receives, would make him an easy target for bullying. Overwhelmed with anxiety, Albus confided in his father. In order to live up to the legacy of his name, Albus presumed that he needed to be sorted into Gryffindor, and while waiting in front of platform 9 3/4, Albus's father, Harry, reassured the young boy that it didn't matter which house he was sorted in. As a matter of fact, the bravest person that Harry had ever known, Severus Snape, was a Slytherin, so enrolling in that house was just as honourable as any other. After hearing that reassurance, Albus turned to board the train, along with his cousin, Rose Granger Weasley. For much of his life, Albus's relationship with Rose was a fairly stable fixture, but from that day, the two would soon grow apart. Rose, just like her parents, Hermione and Ron, would become quite popular at school, but Albus wouldn't fare as well. When he arrived at Hogwarts, Albus was sorted into Slytherin, a fact that made him the target for bullies from all houses. Gryffindor students considered him a traitor, and Slytherin students thought Albus was simply ill-fit for the house. With neither side embracing him, Albus relied on the one friend he made aboard the Hogwarts Express for comfort, Scorpius Malfoy. Together, the pair of quasi-outcasts dared to navigate social life at Hogwarts, but they rarely succeeded. Even as a student, Albus discovered that he couldn't even compare to the lowest-ranking peer in class, much less the great wizards Albus Dumbledore and Severus Snape. Unhappy with his achievements and rejected by his peers, Albus's mental health deteriorated year after year. His parents, Harry and Ginny, weren't entirely ignorant to Albus's struggles, but they didn't know how to help him. Often, Harry would try to lift Albus's spirits by reciting old tales of Harry's childhood heroes and how they handled adversity. But every time Albus heard about Remus, Dumbledore, or Hagrid, the shame he felt for not living up to their legacy grew even worse. Another time, Harry and Ginny even asked their friends, Hermione and Ron, to encourage their daughter to rekindle her friendship with Albus. But when Rose tried to reach out to her cousin, Albus smartly realized that the gesture was insincere, and he rebuked her. In the end, Albus was left with only one choice: rebel. When a strange young woman named Delphi came into his life, Albus and his friend Scorpius decided to join her on an adventure. Together, they would steal a time turner and travel back in time to save the life of Cedric Diggory, a boy who was senselessly killed during the Triwizard Tournament decades prior. But Albus and Scorpius failed to ask Delphi a few important questions before the journey began, and by the time their mission was over, the two boys realized too late that they had been duped. Delphi was never really interested in saving Cedric's life. She wanted to travel back in time to save the life of someone else, Lord Voldemort, because she was his daughter. It took the combined effort of Albus and his father to undo Delphi's plot. In the aftermath, Albus finally understood how his father, Harry, had felt during the Second Wizarding War. Instead of comparing himself to Albus Dumbledore, Severus Snape, and the other heroes who sacrificed their lives, Albus seemed to simply feel grateful for all that they did. Lily Luna Potter. Lily Luna Potter was the third and final child from Harry and Ginny's marriage. She was also their only daughter, which must have been a relief, after the headaches the two parents received from Albus and James's roughhousing childhood. Lily was born 2 years after Albus, which meant she was 4 years younger than James, the oldest Potter child. As you might have guessed, Lily was also named after one of the most important people in Harry's life. Her first name was taken from Harry's mother, Lily, whose deep magic was responsible for both of Voldemort's deaths, and her middle name, Luna, was in honor of Luna Lovegood, a young witch who aided Harry on his journey to rid the world of Voldemort's Horcruxes. When we look at the historical records, Lily, just like James, doesn't seem to show up too often. During her younger years, she probably spent her days doing the same things any young witch would, playing around the house, running errands with her parents, and getting herself into trouble. As she grew older, though, she became increasingly fascinated with Hogwarts and the complex legacy that each of its houses possessed. Along with her cousin, Hugo Weasley, she would often fantasize about which house the Sorting Hat would select her for. By the year 2019, Lily enrolled at Hogwarts, and unlike Albus, who had been sorted into Slytherin, Lily was sorted into Gryffindor, joining her eldest brother, James.